A very good morning to all. Today, we are moving to the 9th chapter, and the name of the chapter is Living Organisms and Their Surroundings. So, first of all, what is the meaning of organisms? Any living being ranging from microscopic bacteria to large elephants and everything in between. So, any living being. So, you all know what is a living thing. Things which need air, water and food to live are called as a living being. So, any living being ranging from a microscopic bacteria. So, what is this microscopic bacteria? Bacteria means it is very small. So, microscopic bacteria which cannot be seen with our naked eye. That means which is very small, which is too small. So, any living being ranging from microscopic bacteria to large elephants. Elephant, we know, the largest land animal, and everything in between. So, that is called organism. That is, it can be plants, animals, etc. So, any living being ranging from a microscopic bacteria to large elephants and everything in between. So, that is known as organisms. Okay. So, moving on, habitat. Have you all heard of this term habitat? So, what is this habitat? It is a natural place that provides them with food, water, shelter and right kind of environment they need to live. That is known as the habitat. So, we all have a habitat, right? In the same way, plants and animals, they also have a habitat in which they get the proper food, water and the right kind of environment. So, that is called the habitat. For example, plants and animals that grow in forest will not be found on mountains. So, animals or plants that grow in forest will not be found on mountains. That is because the forest is their habitat that provides them with food, water and the right kind of environment. So, animals and plants, everything have a habitat that provides them with food, water and the right kind of environment. Let's take the example of wild ass. It is found in desert. The habitat of wild ass is desert. So, if you take page number 111, there is a paragraph given that tells about the habitat of wild ass, and that is the Ran of Kutch in Gujarat, which is a hot sandy desert. So, the habitat of this wild ass is Ran of Kutch in Gujarat. So, that is a hot sandy desert, and that is the right habitat for this animal because it provides it with air, water, food and the right kind of environment to live. So, that is called the habitat. And there are different types of habitats: tropical rainforest, mountain regions, grassland, oceans. So, all these are different types of habitats. So, different animals live in these different habitats. There are animals that live in tropical rainforest. There are animals that live in mountain regions. There are animals that live in grasslands. There are animals that live in oceans. So, there are different types of habitats on earth. So, habitats provide food, water, shelter and the right kind of environment. So, there are different habitats on earth. Moving on, the next is about adaptation. So, have you all heard of the term adaptation? So, what is adaptation? The presence of specific feature or certain habits which enable a plant or animal to live in its surroundings. So, we discussed about habitat. So what is adaptation? Adaptation means the body features or the habits that helps the animals to live in its habitat comfortably. We call it as adaptation. Let's take the example of a fish. Where do this fish live? They live in water, right? And this fish has some special features that helps them to survive in water. What if this fish is made to live on land? Can it survive? No. What about a monkey? So we know that monkey is a terrestrial animal. It lives on land. What if this monkey is made to live in water? Can it survive in water? No, it cannot survive in water. Why? Because it is not the right habitat for monkey. And monkey has some special features that helps them to survive only on land. So adaptation means the body features or the habits that helps the animals to survive or live comfortably in their habitat. That is called adaptation. Now let's discuss one example that is about polar bear. So where do this polar bear live? It lives in the North Polar region. And this polar bear has some special feature that helps them to survive in its habitat. It lives in the cold Arctic region. And it has some adaptive features, it has some special features that helps them to survive in this extreme cold climate. The first thing is that its body is covered with thick layer of hollow hair. So, the body of the polar bear is covered with thick fur that traps air and it keeps the body of the polar bear warm. The next is it has a powerful sense of smell. So these polar bears, they feed on seal and it can smell a seal which is more than 10 kilometers away, which means the polar bear has a good sense of smell. The next is it sleeps for 7 to 8 hours every day. So to conserve energy, when an animal is awake or when it is moving, it uses its energy. So in order to conserve energy, it sleeps for about 7 to 8 hours every day. And during winter time, it sleeps for about 18 to 20 hours every day. So polar bears have some special features that helps them to survive in the cold Arctic region. The first thing is that its body is covered with thick fur that traps air and it keeps its body warm. And also, it has a thick layer of fat under the skin that keeps its body warm. So these are some of the adaptive features that helps the polar bear to survive in the cold Arctic region. We discussed about habitat. Habitat is made up of living and non-living components. That is, the habitat is made up of biotic and abiotic components. So what does this biotic components means? It means living components. Plants, animals and other living beings, it comes under the biotic components. Then abiotic components, that is the non-living. Non-living components are called as abiotic components. That is air, water, sunlight, soil, all this comes under abiotic components. So every habitat is made up of living and non-living components. That is biotic and abiotic components. Here you can see the biotic and abiotic components of a region. That is the living and non-living components of a region. The biotic components of habitat depends on each other as well as on the abiotic components to survive. The biotic components depend on each other. We know that biotic components means the living components. plants, animals and other living beings. So they depend on each other, as well as they depend on abiotic components to live. So the biotic components, that is the living components, also depend on non-living components. That is, they depend on air, water and sunlight to live. So the biotic components of habitat depend on each other as well as on abiotic components to live. So here in this picture, you can see the living and non-living components. Living components, you can see here is the deer, plants. These are biotic components. What about abiotic components? That is the non-living components. Here you can see the water, soil, all these are abiotic components. So habitat is made up of living and non-living components, that is biotic and abiotic components. So I hope this class was clear to you. In this class, we discussed about habitat. Habitat means the natural home of a living thing, the place where it provides food, water, shelter and the right kind of environment. We call it as habitat. And we discussed about adaptation, that is the body features and habits that helps the animal to survive in its habitat comfortably. We call it as the adaptation. So different animals have their own adaptive features that helps them to survive in their habitat. And we discussed about polar bears, the different adaptive features that helps them to survive in the cold Arctic region. Then we discussed habitat is made up of both living and non-living components, that is biotic and abiotic components. So I hope this class was clear to you. We'll meet in the next class and discuss a new topic. Till then, thank you.